Hello again, Kevin Inoue here from Fight Designer LLC. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about switchblades. Now, the thing is, switchblade knives pop up in a lot of scripts. This last year, Crybaby, the musical, Paradise Blue by Dominic Morisseau. I mean, I've had a number of shows that called for switchblades, and they're just one of those classic knives that that people love to put in stories because they got so many connotations, so many stories about them, so many associations that we can rely on to tell us about character by the choice of what they carry. We have focus issues. We have specific ideas about the kind of character who carries a switchblade. Right. Now the thing is, switchblades are to some degree regulated. Some localities, municipalities, states specifically ban them. But much more common is just a ban on the interstate commerce around them. So sort of selling them across state lines, right? Making a profit by selling them across state lines, which basically just means they're almost impossible to get, right? Now, what you can find more frequently is something like this, the Switchblade Comb. There's a number of varieties of these kicking around. And actually, these just popped up. This particular type just popped up more recently on Amazon and things. And I love it that it is a little more sturdy than the old ones. The sort of cheapy novelty ones that I remember from when I was a kid are much cheaper, kind of stamped metal. This actually is decent. Comes with a pocket clip. It's got some screws and things. And I had an idea at first that I could replace the stainless steel comb on this with an aluminum blade, and I tried that on one of them. And frankly, what I discovered is the style, the design here, it's not that great. It's really not something that's made to hold up. And when you put it in a softer metal going up against a harder metal, it's doable, and I was able to get one that would deploy when I pushed the button. But it's not going to last. It depends on this funky little cutout thing here. It's a very thin piece at the end, and it just kind of catches on this little bit of a hook there. So sadly, converting these to an aluminum blade was not my best choice. I know Jesse Belsky, who does some amazing custom work these days. He's got some aluminum ones that he used to sell at least, but he had a little caveat on those as well of, you know what, they're not going to hold up. They're going to fall apart. That's just kind of what you got. Because aluminum knives are kind of our stage standard. They tend to be a little bit lighter, which means you can make them thicker without them being heavier, and thicker means less sharp, which means safer. And the fact that it's a softer metal not only means it's a little easier to work with, but it also means it could never really hold an edge, which makes it a lot easier to tell school administrators that this is not a knife. There's no way this could ever really hold an edge. It is very specifically a stage prop and not a weapon. Whereas some of these switchblades that I have as bought were knives. We're sharp. And so then you have to go back and blunt them, take the edge off to where it can be used for, depending on how blunt you make it. I tend to think of these as sort of what I call movie safe. So it looks sharp enough that it doesn't look obviously blunt unless you get too close. But it's nowhere near as blunt as an aluminum training knife or most of the stage props that I might throw out there. So, I mean, I can do this and not cut myself with this, but I wouldn't necessarily advocate using these for a lot of stage combat because it's still a fairly, it'd be like getting stabbed with a fork. I mean, the tines of a fork are not meant to be sharp, but I wouldn't want to get stabbed with one, right? So to be a true switchblade, it's got a spring that opens it. There's usually a little safety here, and if the safety is up, it won't deploy. If the safety is down, push that button, pops right out. There's a locking mechanism that's fairly unique to these. Along the back, you lift it up and it pops out of the little circle there, but they're usually made with sort of a pivoting top part here. So if you just pull back on that, and zoom in here a little bit, so you can see closer. So if I just pivot that, you can kind of see how that pivots, and that pries up the safety, and that closes that. I'll admit, first time I used one of these on a set, I actually didn't know that trick. An actor had to show me. I was sitting here trying to pry this thing up. It was a pain in the butt. I felt really dumb. So now you don't have to feel dumb like I did then. So that's pretty standard for actual switchblades. You've got this push button deployment. Now, because these are pretty hard to get, and because sometimes you don't want just the comb, these also have a safety, by the way. There's a little flip thing up here. Often what we'll do is we'll use sort of pseudo switchblades. And this is what you tend to see much more available. These are a lot easier to get, they're cheaper to get. But you'll notice there's no button on the side, so you can't just push a button and have it pop open. That sort of automatic knife is much more likely to be regulated, whereas the assisted opening knives are much less likely to be regulated. So these are certainly easy enough to open and can kind of simulate the action, but you do have to do a little more to it. So what these have, you can kind of see this thing sticks out a little bit more on one side than it does on the other. And if you push down on this extended thing here, basically what I was pushing down on was this, it will flip open. And this just has a liner lock, so more like a standard, you know, like I'd have on my Leatherman, right? So it's not that I can just push a button, but all I really have to do is drag my finger down here, and it pops open. So these are what we ended up using for Crybaby, for example. And it just meant that I had to take a minute or two with the actress who pulled it to be able to have her do something like that and have it have the same kind of threatening gesture. Where's my camera? There we go. Right. So it could look very similar in how it opens to how you might have an actual switchblade pop open. Looks and sounds fairly similar. Just takes a little more practice, and it's not actually a switchblade. Now the main giveaway in profile is going to be this thing that sticks out here. It's this extra little, it's almost like a queen on dagger, right? So that's kind of our main giveaway. And there's a decent variety of things you can get in this same sort of flick open style, right? Different kinds of grips. This one has a belt clip, which can be kind of nice, whereas the other one didn't. These tend to not have safeties because there's not as much danger of just accidentally pushing something down. This is one I've had for a while. This is an older style that basically works the same way, but it's a little bit stiffer, but it's got a little something on both ends here. So sometimes you'd find these as well. But same idea, right? It's something where you have to flick part of it open to be able to get it open in a way that you don't with an actual switchblade. For most of what we do, that's going to be good enough, right? It'll get the idea across. And because they're much easier to find, it's just going to be cheaper, it's going to be simpler. You can have a backup so that if it starts to wear out or something during the run of the show, these you do want to have a variety of hardware and tools available backstage, because these things do get loose, these little screws. And this is weird, it's a mix because you've got some of them that are the small star-shaped heads that you have to find a special driver for those. I've got a small ratchet set that came with those, the little star-shaped things. They're not the same as a hex wrench, but then it also has some that use a hex wrench. So the big ones at the ends here use a hex wrench, and these are the smaller star-shaped ones. And so in Crybaby, they did actually end up losing at least one of these little star-shaped things because I didn't warn them about it, I didn't Loctite it, and I didn't give them a thing to tighten it with. So I'm not surprised that one of those ended up going missing. But again, because these are cheap and not hard to replace, not that big a deal. I'm not too worried about it. Whereas the actual switchblades are much harder to replace, and so I'd be a little bit more annoyed. But fortunately, most of these that I've been able to find have actual rivets here. I'm not sure exactly if they're two-piece rivets or if they were actually peened over like normal rivets, but they're basically brass pins that go through. So these are they're not threaded, right? You don't have to go through and tighten them, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's a lot more reliable in that sense. It's a little more consistent. It's less likely to loosen and to have parts go missing. So for those of you who are doing shows, anything set in the 1950s, you got your Rebel with or without a cause. Chances are decent. The script might call for a switchblade. Now there's other things you can certainly use instead. Depending on the character, it's entirely possible that maybe something like a Balisong would be just as appropriate, right? if what you want is that that acting beat of the flourish, right? The deployment being something cool. I mean, yeah, there's something a little intimidating about the ease of the just being able to push that button. But in a way, there's something, you know, just more playable action, more play in it, specifically with something like a balisong or a butterfly knife. And there's a variety of ways you can open these that'll also have connotations that tell you that this is somebody who, you know, while they may or may not know how to fight with these things, they've spent a lot of time playing with them at the very least. I did a Romeo and Juliet at Balagon Theater in Seattle ages ago, a company that's not there anymore, I think, where Tybalt used one of these because, you know, he was somebody who liked his weapons, liked to show off, he was a little flashy. It gave him a fun sort of dueling option. And it gave him an automatic built-in flourish every time he wanted to pull it out and have a little face-off with Mercutio or Romeo or whoever, right? As well as putting it away, having a little built-in flourish as well. Or if you want something more efficient, you can do this kind of fun one where you pop the pin, hold the pin, pinch it between the thumb and forefinger, and just push down and back. And grab it, and then you've got it in this sort of ice pick grip here. And then put it away, grab the end without the pin, and you can do a little reverse skip deployment there. So that can be another fun one with these. Of course, there's lots of other fancier ways you can get these to do their thing. Yep, I haven't played around with this much in a while. They do take practice. You can switch around from reverse grip to forward grip, standard grip. There's little twirls you can do, that kind of stuff. You get the idea. So it's a little bit fancier, a little bit, you know, definitely less direct than you might have just for something like that. But it really depends on the theatrical effect you want to have, because let's face it, we're choosing these weapons not just to set a time and a place, but also for character, and because we want those playable acting beats, right? And, you know, I'll admit, I always cringe a little bit when someone says I need a switchblade, because there's so many different things that could mean, and some of them are kind of problematic. Anytime you have a complicated mechanical device, there's always going to be problems. The more moving parts, the harder it can be, and the harder it is for your actor to use, the harder it can be. And so that can also be kind of conflicting demands between the really easy for the actor, just got to remember to maybe even tape the safety down, but the push button kind of almost idiot-proof thing there, versus the actor has to know how to do it and look slick, but the device is not as complex, so there's less mechanically that can go wrong and a little more actorly that can go wrong with these, versus the takes even more actor training, but the mechanical device is just two hinged pins, and the only thing you sometimes have to do is tighten these up a little bit, the pins here. If it gets a little too loose and wobbly, sometimes you need to tighten those up a little bit. So you've got options. So switchblades, balisong, butterfly knives, and really the only real difference there is sometimes the pin is on one side or the other side. And you can get these that are one-sided, two-sided, etc. Any of these can be a fun choice, though, when you've got a character who's your sort of your street gang tough, or your mafioso, or whatever. I was hearing a great story from Richard Gilbert in an interview that I did with him, which I'll probably pop up on YouTube soon, about a Hamlet set with in the sort of gangland Chicago of the 1940s, using stiletto knives. That sounded kind of fun. There was some cool stuff he was talking about there. So you've got some options, and you know, any of these are available through Fight Designer LLC if you want to rent. But you know, the basic flip open ones, these are also pretty easy to buy. You just got to be willing to grind off the edge and dull them down yourself enough that you're comfortable using them and handing them to your actors. So that's today's little tidbit. Just a little something maybe to keep you occupied and informed while you're on coronavirus break. And the great home teach-in of 2020. Stay safe, stay healthy, look good, have fun, and I'll see you next time.